Meeting of this year. Is there a motion to accept the minutes of the last meeting? With one abstention from buildings, it's unanimous.
No, I abstained to it.
Oh, okay. Debbie Scott was also abstaining. Start of the show, DEP.
Yep.
Set the stage.
Okay. Good morning, Russell McKinney is DEP Legal, Bureau of Legal Affairs. This month, DEP is requesting that the board approve requests for 29 cease and desist orders relating to failure to install backflow prevention devices. In each of these cases, the building owner has been ordered to install the required devices and has failed to do so, based upon which they have been issued a summons, which has been adjudicated in violation. And in each of these cases, the building owner has still not complied with the commissioner's order, based on which the department is asking the board to issue cease and desist orders in each of these cases.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
Can I just recuse myself from one of those?
Sure, just
Yeah.
which one?
It's 3920 Park Square.
Okay, with one recusal, it's unanimous. That's it?
Yep, that's it.
All guests and on standby. Preceding reports? Reports of
Good morning, I'm Kelly Corso, Assistant Director for Education to the Hearings Division. And we have 33 reports today for the board. One of them is a post-sealing report, and the 32 remaining ones are all pre-sealing reports, including one that is a request for a shut-off. So I'm going to start with the post-sealing report, and this is for a noise case. This case began back in 2016 when a summons was issued for noise above allowable levels from respondent 515 Madison Avenue's kitchen exhaust equipment at its restaurant at 515 Madison Avenue in Manhattan. Decisions were issued as a result of the summonses that imposed penalties and ordering that the respondent comply with the noise code. Respondent failed to comply, and on December 22nd, 2016, DEP requested that the board issue a C&D order. The board did issue the C&D order to the respondent, ordering the respondent appear at a special hearing to show why its equipment should not be shut down. At the hearing, pre-sealing hearing on May 16, 2017, the respondent presented proof of work done to bring its exhaust equipment into compliance with the noise code. And based on that proof, the hearing officer recommended that the equipment remain unsealed, only the reinspection by DEP of the equipment and subsequent inspections for a period of 180 days for no violations. So DEP then went out and re-inspected the equipment on October 3rd, 2017, and found that it did not comply with the noise code and sealed the equipment. Respondent appeared for post-sealing hearings on October 10th, 17th, and 31st, 2017. And at the October 31st hearing, DEP reported that an inspection on October 18th had showed that the respondent's equipment is now back in compliance with the noise code and should be unsealed. So the hearing officer is agreeing with DEP's recommendation that the equipment remain unsealed if DEP's initial reinspection and further re-inspections for a period of 180 days show no violations. So that's the post-sealing report. So we also have, as I mentioned, 32 reports for pre-sealings. One of the reports involves a wastewater discharge permit, and 31 of the reports involve backflow violations, one of which involves a recommendation for a water shutoff. So the wastewater discharge permit report, for this case, DEP has requested discontinuance of the C&D proceeding because the respondent has complied with the order, and the hearing officer is agreeing with DEP's request for discontinuance and recommends that the C&D proceeding be discontinued. On 30 of the backflow cases, we have pre-sealing reports, as I mentioned. 17 of those cases, the hearing officers recommend no sealing or other action based on respondents' ethics and compliance, which were presented at the hearings. And in 13 of those cases, the hearing officers agreed with DEP's recommendation to discontinue the C&D proceedings because DEP record reviews indicate that backflow prevention devices have been installed on the premises. And the final report is for a backflow case, and it involves a recommendation for a water shutoff. And in this case, it involves a synagogue. The respondent's name is Congregation called Chasadai Squara. I'm totally pronouncing it wrong, I'm sure, but that's the best I can do. It's located at 4502 9th Avenue in Brooklyn. And this case goes back to 2012 when DEP issued a commissioner's order to the respondent to install a backflow prevention device at his premises. The order warned the respondent that failure to comply could result in termination of his water supply to the premises. And in March of 2013, DEP issued a summons to the respondent for failure to comply with the commissioner's order, and the summons was sustained at a hearing in February of 2015. In June of 2016, DEP determined that the required backflow prevention devices still had not been installed at the site of premises and requested a C&D order from the board. The board issued the C&D order in June of 2016 and directed the respondent to appear at a special hearing on August 23rd to show why the water supply to the premises should not be shut off. At hearings between August 23rd, 2016 and November 14th, 2017, the respondent's representative stated that there is a Department of Buildings stop work order on the premises, and that is preventing the respondent from complying with the commissioner's order. The case has been adjourned 11 times since the first pre-sealing hearing on August 23rd, 2016, for the respondent to comply with the commissioner's order. The respondent's representative was advised at the hearings that water would be shut off if the respondent continued to ignore the order. At the last hearing on November 14th, 2017, respondent's representative offered no evidence of progress towards achieving compliance or any specific information as to what is being done to resolve the stop work order on the premises. DEP recommended at the last hearing that the water service to the premises be terminated, since no evidence of respondent's progress or compliance was presented. And based on the lengthy history of the case and respondent's continued failure to comply with the order, and to provide any specific information as to what is being done to resolve the stop work order on the premises, the hearing officer recommends that water supply to the premises be shut off.
Any question?
Is that a standalone synagogue, or are there any residential tenants or anything like that that would be affected?
Yeah, I mean, we looked at it on Google Street Maps,
Yeah.
on the street view. It's a 2-story building. There's nothing attached to it, no residential, nothing. It's just a religious.
Yeah, just standalone synagogue. Thank you.
Elizabeth Maurer, citizen member. So do we have any information about what the basis for the stop work order is, and is there any use of the building now while that's in place?
I don't remember specifically what the stop work order is for. I know that they've known about it for years and have not, either haven't been trying to resolve it or have been unsuccessful in resolving it.
Was there a permit affiliated with that at some point, or was it a stop work order just issued on the property and it's hanging there?
I'm sorry?
Was there ever a DOB permit issued to do work on
That's
that
the issue.
building, or-
The issue is that in order to comply with the backflow requirement to install the device and generate the required test reports, you have to get a Department of Buildings permit, and they
Yeah.
can't get it.
No, I realize that, but the cause of the stop work order, was it because they had permits issued and were engaged in doing work, or was this?
Yeah, that was,
Stop work
yeah,
order just
I'm not
issued?
sure exactly what the stop work
I
order was
believe
for.
that is the case. I believe that there were at least some summonses issued to the premises for
While
without a
there was an
permit.
open permit.
Yeah, there could be basically 2 reasons for a stop work order. One is that they didn't have a permit to begin with, or they had a permit, but they were still engaging in dangerous practices on the property, or not dangerous, in violation of some safety regulation, like gas connections or stuff like that.
Or out of scope.
Tom Spetner, citizen member. Maybe this doesn't really go to the notion of why or why not we should shut off, but the documentation we have says that there were 13 hearings since August 2016 where the respondent was represented. How do we wind up with 13 hearings on the same issue?
Well, they are represented by counsel.
Sure, but it's.
And counsel is coming in every time saying, we're working on it, we're trying, we're working on it, and asking for adjournments. And because, you know, we're not doing this in order to shut people's water off, we're doing it in order to get compliance, you know, up to a point, you know, but this is one that got to the point where adjourning it again seemed pointless. So that's why our attorney made the recommendation to shut it off.
Right, I guess the number 13 sort of leaps off the page as, you know, I can see maybe 3, maybe 5, I don't know what the number is, but 13 sounds like one a month for.
I have to agree with Mr. Sentner. The practice is if the agency consents that they get an adjournment, but it's hard not to come to the conclusion that they're playing a game of jerking us around.
Yeah, look, I credit the philosophy of wanting to get people in compliance and not shutting their water off. I just found 13 to be
So yeah, this is one of the high volume reps,
They're
who's there all the
disingenuous.
time, and so, you know.
okay. Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions, observations? Is there a motion to accept? It's unanimous. And does anybody want to make a bet on how fast they comply with the words at all? Is there a motion to go into executive session?
Excuse me, before we go to executive session, there were some materials that were distributed that aren't on the agenda regarding some correspondence.
Revised agenda.
No, on the revised agenda, I have the revised agenda, it's not here. So I just want to make sure that item regarding the correspondence from Mr. Abingdor, that's his name. I don't know why it's not reflected on the agenda, but maybe it's just a scrivener's error. I just want to make sure that we don't skip that topic.
You want to talk about it now?
Sure. I mean, it was distributed by Francis on, I think, the 4th. But in any event, there was some correspondence directed to the board, and but it named me in particular. For what reason, I have no idea. And my remarks do not go to the substance of the reply that was fashioned.
Well, let me put it in
Well,
context how it's kind of weird all the way around. An individual contacted us by email requesting the personal addresses of board members, purportedly to contact them or whatever. He also wanted to know when the board was meeting so he could come in and whatever. We responded to him, anybody can come in and sit at a board meeting, so it's open to the public, but we're not giving out people's personal addresses. We told him that what he should do if he wants to contact an individual board member is to write that personal letter, mail it to the Environmental Control Board, care of the Environmental Control Board, in a sealed envelope, and we will pass it on to whomever it's addressed to. As a matter of fact, that's true virtually anybody. What he did instead was he responded by email with an attached copy of the letter to only one board member. And then in the email, he also said that he was requesting that it be distributed to all the board members,
right,
including me.
So that's well understood. So I have several questions. The first one is, why was it removed from this agenda?
Because it's not really a board issue.
Well, that's not true. I mean, that's flatly not true. If there's correspondence to the board, it's a board issue.
I mean,
Excuse me, please, I'll not talk over you.
All right.
First of all, if there's correspondence to the board, it should be distributed to the board. We get very little correspondence as far as I'm aware, but you know, just as a basic matter of governance, if there's correspondence to the board, we can't acquit our responsibilities as board members without knowledge of that correspondence. Do you not agree, or am I making a point that you care to rebut?
Yes,
It was distributed to the
it was
board.
distributed to the board.
Let's be
And it was
clear.
a stupid letter, of which we get thousands of every year.
Okay, but forget
And we
about,
don't wind up with massive discussions of every idiot who writes us a letter.
okay, I don't know that the letter was stupid, but
I think it was.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your opinion, but this isn't to denigrate the correspondent. I think that that's probably something that should be, an opinion that should be expressed privately, not on the record.
No, I want to express it right now. The person made absolutely ridiculous statements in there, demonstrating absolute ignorance of the process, making requests of us which are ultra-virus, and it's a typical wacko letter of which I get thousands of.
Well, I'm not,
And it was
excuse
addressed to me, I was copied on it, and it's my obligation to respond to it. And I did, by having a person respond to it on my behalf, because after 40 years of dealing with wackos from the public, I know that if I sign the letter personally, I'll have a pen pal for the rest of my life. But if you have someone else respond to it, then they don't think they have you trapped into correspondence for eternity.
Excuse me, the letter was addressed to my attention, okay? It was
And
not.
you got it, and you can do whatever you want with it.
Excuse me, let me please continue. I am not here to denigrate the correspondent or to characterize his opinions. I'm talking about governance
Governance of what?
of this board. And
What is this board governing?
that's a separate issue that I'll address next. However, when there's correspondence directed to me in my capacity as a board member, I understand that there's a principle that there should be a turnaround time of 14 days to reply to that, and I think that's a sound and understandable and reasonable policy to make that happen. However, this letter was addressed to me, and it was not shown to me until the reply had been made, which I would suggest presents an opportunity for us to communicate more effectively in terms of making our responses to the public. In my capacity as a citizen member of the board, this correspondence was not shown to me until it had been already replied, until the reply had been fashioned and transmitted. So if Mr. Avigdor had a good point, a bad point, or in between mediocre point, is a side issue. The fact is, the correspondence had not been shown to me, and if he had an excellent point, this could have been compounded by the failure for me to understand what any response was before it had been fashioned. So my point is, we need to collaborate better as a board, communicate better as a board. I'll note for the record that I asked you to reply to my email asking for you to engage with me on this, and you never responded to me. I'm acting in good faith. I'm confused by the fact that, by the procedural history here, and I feel like this is an opportunity for us to have a more constructive relationship and understand exactly what the public's concerns are, because I am a citizen member of this board. I was appointed to represent the citizenry, and Mr. Avigdor, whether he has a good or not good point to make, he deserves the benefit of the doubt, and I deserve the opportunity in my capacity as a board member to be aware of his concern and have some notion of how the reply is going to look before it's transmitted.
So can I just ask a question? When you say that you have some confusion about the history here.
There's no confusion.
Okay.
The history is...
I thought you just said you had
Okay,
confusion.
if I said that, I
Okay.
misspoke. Here's what happened. Mr. Avigdor wrote to the board, but addressed the letter to me personally. How he picked my name, I have no idea. Maybe I was at the top of the list, or he just liked my name. I don't know. And I don't know, or frankly care about whether or not his point was good, off the wall, or in between. I mean, I care, of course, because I want to know the concern. My point is simply that this was mishandled.
I disagree with it being mishandled. 2 points, right now. This is it. I responded to that letter based on what he said about oath. That's my business, that's not this board's business, number one. Number two, You have a copy of the letter. You can take it for whatever you want. You can do with it whatever you want. You can respond to it in any way you want. I responded to the letter, not on behalf of the board, on behalf of both, where he made massive misrepresentations and clearly didn't understand what the process was and whose responsibility is for what.
Correspondence directed to the board
The
should be
correspondence
shared.
was also shared with me by the writer who said to copy me, and I took it and I responded based on what he sent me. That's it.
Let me ask you a different question then. What's the harm in showing it to me before it goes out?
None whatsoever.
So then why didn't that happen?
Because it's irrelevant, because I would have gone out whether you saw it or not. My response from oath would be my response from oath.
Okay.
Whatever you say.
I respectfully object.
Well, fine, my objection is noted,
I feel like
for what it's
number
worth.
Oh, it's worth plenty if you're
Not
going to be
to me.
denigrating. Well, you're saying my opinion as a board member doesn't matter?
Not as far as the operation of the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings. That's correct.
Can you explain?
The Environmental Control Board's function is to be the Environmental Control Board. The Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings is an independent agency. The Environmental Control Board is an appendage to that agency for basically appellate processes, and that's it. For items that the charter specifically directs to the Environmental Control Board.
So are you
So
saying
the
then that,
operation of the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings is my responsibility, not this board's.
are you stating then that correspondence directed to me in my capacity as a board
I
member?
didn't say that. I
I'm
said,
asking you a question, please don't interrupt me. I'm just asking, and please, I'm not
I
trying-
know where you're going.
No, but I also want to note that your bellicose tone is inappropriate. I'm trying to just get to the bottom of a simple governance issue.
It's not a governance issue.
Oh, it most certainly is when correspondence.
That's
is-
your opinion.
It's not my opinion, it's a fact.
It's not a fact.
I'm trying to execute my.
That letter
Excuse me,
related to
please.
the operation of oath, not to the operation of the Environmental Control Board.
Please stop interrupting me. I want to just make a couple things understood better, not just for my benefit, but maybe for the benefit of everyone, and Mr. Avigdor, if he gets an opportunity to see this video. And I want to just pull this back from a bellicose posture to one where we're going to act as reasoned and collegial professionals. It's my reading of the facts here that this letter was directed to me in my capacity as a board member. And whether or not Mr. Avigdor misunderstood the function of oath or misunderstood the function of the Environmental Control Board or had a good response, a good issue or a poorly reasoned issue is not the point that I'm trying to address here. The point I'm addressing is that when correspondence is directed to me in my capacity as a board member, it is improper for me to not see our response, which is made as a board.
No, it's not. It's made by me. By the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings.
That is a hair.
It is not a response
is
by the
not-
Environmental Control Board.
Well,
Which is to say, Tom, if you would like to write some response, you're entitled to.
if I were to write to Mr. Avigdor and not share that response with the board, it would be considered an ultra-virus act by me, would it not?
Well,
Not necessarily.
I didn't
That's just flatly incorrect.
I don't have an opinion at this moment since.
You
it's
should,
directed
because you're an
to you.
attorney, okay? And if
It would be an ultra-virus
Don't
act
try to
only if
Don't
you
try to
were,
insult me. I'm not
you were
trying
I'm not
writing.
trying to
as-
insult you, I'm trying to point out to you that
I
you've
am
got a
saying-
misread of the law.
I
If you
am
think,
saying,
excuse me,
I have, first of all, I have not expressed a read of the law. Let me state what I'm stating.
Okay,
I'm
please.
stating that I don't have an opinion as to whether or not it would be ultra-virus for you to respond to the letter since it's directed
My
to
question-
you as a board member. It
But-
would be up to you to respond or to sit around and have a meeting of the board and to decide what it is you'd like to
if
draft.
I were to respond to Mr. Avigdor without sharing that response to the board, if I'm writing to him in my capacity as a board member, I would suggest that bespeaks poor communication at a minimum and poor governance for sure.
All right, that's your
Well,
opinion.
but isn't the basics though, Tom?
No,
that
this is the
in order to
basics.
respond-
Excuse me, this is about the basics.
In order
What-
to respond, I'm not finished.
Please.
In order to respond to a letter like this, you have to know the operations of the agency. It's required. And that's stuff that we do know and that the board does
I-
not necessarily know.
And I credit that. I've said this about 3 or 4 times, that Mr. Avigdor, whether he was right or wrong, whether your response was good or not good, is not the point that I'm trying to express. And if you choose to ignore it, that's okay.
I'm not
But
choosing to ignore
well,
it.
then that's.
I'm
But
just
then why are
stating
you explaining
if-
that the
if
process?
we-
Excuse me.
we can
Well,
spend a
excuse me,
lifetime
please. I'm still.
arguing
No, I'm not
about
going to spend any
the
time
basis
arguing.
that
We're going to speak.
operational knowledge
Excuse
is
me.
needed
Please
to
don't talk
respond.
over me. It's really important that I make this clear. Okay? And I'll let you reply, and if I have a rebuttal, I'll make it. My point is that I was not in any position to address the sufficiency or the clarity of his arguments. That's a conversation that we should have had, because the letter itself, maybe it is full of mistakes or misunderstandings. You're in the best position to address those. I don't only concede that, I would espouse it and advance it. I agree with you that you have special knowledge of the workings of the board and the interplay of the charter and all of the other operative rules and guiding principles under
That's all
which
I'm
we...
trying to say.
Okay, and that's fine. All I'm trying to say is that when correspondence comes to me, in my capacity as a board member, the proper way to handle it is for you to share it with me, and if there's a reply that's being fashioned and you don't share it with me, it behooves me to ask, why was I excluded? And it also behooves me to ask, why was this item removed from the agenda?
The last sentence is the key question here. And I think you're laboring under the impression that my response was on behalf of the board. It was not. And since it was not on behalf of the board, there is no purpose in taking it or discussing it with the board. If there is a board response, or maybe a response from a board member, that's a different question, and that's something for the board.
If your
But
response was
I
not
want
on
to be
behalf...
perfectly clear, in case anybody's under any misapprehension, this board has no authority whatsoever over the operation of the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings, which was the main misinterpretation of this gentleman's letter.
Okay, not
And in
suggesting...
that capacity is how I responded to it, because he, the writer, on his initiative, decided to share that correspondence with every member of this board, which includes me. And when I got it in my capacity as the head of this agency, I saw that it needed correction. I directed my staff person to draft a letter on my behalf to him, disabusing him of his misimpressions.
Okay, but, excuse me, I'm sorry, Elizabeth. Excuse
Which
me.
does not obviate you doing whatever you want to do, or for that matter, the rest of the board doing anything it wants to do as the board,
Okay.
as the Environmental Control Board.
Please allow me to reply, because you skipped over my question about why it was removed from the agenda, but let me get back to that.
Because it's
Excuse me.
irrelevant.
It's not irrelevant.
That's your opinion.
It's not my opinion.
It
It's
is
the
your
fact.
opinion.
Excuse
Are you
me.
giving your opinion or not?
No, I'm telling you the fact.
Well, your
is-
facts are wrong.
No, the facts are the facts, Fidel. You can't choose your facts.
I'm not
Choose
choosing my
your
facts.
opinion.
I'm not Donald Trump either making up false facts.
I
Like you
don't
are.
know how Donald Trump is relevant here, but my point is a simple one. The letter was addressed to the board. It was
It
not.
was addressed to you, and then it
Excuse
was
me.
shared with the board.
Excuse me.
So,
The
if
letter-
you want the board to deal with it, make a motion for the board to deal with it. Otherwise, what are we doing?
Let me please continue. Please stop talking over me. The letter was addressed to the board. For Oath to reply on behalf of the board,
Oath did not reply to on behalf of the board. I don't know how to put that in any more plain English.
you just said.
It
you just
replied
said-
on behalf of Oath.
Okay, first of all, I don't know why you're adopting such a bellicose tone, but
Because
I
I'm
think it's,
tired of nonsense.
this is not nonsense.
This is rubbish.
This is basic corporate governance.
This is not a corporate governance. This is not a matter of this board that I responded to. I responded to a matter of oath. Yes, sir.
At the very least, I think what Tom was trying to say is that he should have been advised of the response.
Well, I'm sorry his feelings are hurt.
It's
but
not about
his-
feelings
his-
being hurt.
It's
about
irrelevant, but-
communication. Why is it such a big deal for
That's what I wanna
O,
know.
who has the knowledge to respond to the letter, and he's acknowledged that? Why is it such a big deal for him to not be advised as to what's going on? At the very least, it was addressed, the letter was addressed to him specifically.
So, he's been advised of what the letter is.
After the fact, after the letter was sent out in response.
It was Oath's letter that went out in response to a copy that Oath got.
The letter was addressed to me.
Yes, it was addressed to
So why
you.
is Oath responding?
Because Oath was sent a copy by the writer. I mean, I am speaking English, aren't I?
But I
Yes,
think you're missing the
Elizabeth?
point of the communication part of this.
What's the point of the communication part?
We are part of the board. The letter was addressed to him as a board member, as a citizen member,
And it was sent to him.
after the fact.
After what fact?
After it was written
Well,
and
obviously,
sent.
After the
so what?
That's the point.
It was not sent on behalf of the board. So,
I just want to make, I'm sorry, I've had my hand up for a
Yeah.
while. and
the board's opinion on my response is irrelevant.
I just want to make a suggestion. I understand what you're saying, that it was not written on behalf of the board. And I understand to you that that's very clear. To the person to whom it was addressed, Mr. Avigdor, who obviously has some confusion about the difference between Oath and the board. Clearly, that was the whole point of the response, or at least part of the point, was the
Correct.
confusion. I don't know if this will ever come up again, but if it does, my suggestion to you would be to put in the very first paragraph of your response on behalf of Oath and not on behalf of the board, to make it very clear that this is being written on behalf of Oath and not on behalf of the board. Because if you look at the first paragraph of the response, it says that Oath is in receipt of your letter to Mr. Spetner, a member of the Environmental Control Board, which is chaired by Fidel Del Valle, Commissioner and Chief Administrative Law Judge of Oath. So even that, to a person who obviously is under some confusion about the differing roles of Oath and the board, that paragraph in and of itself, I think, is just enhancing that confusion. And I think it would be very easy to make it clear, this response is written on behalf of Oath and not of the Environmental Control Board to whom your letter was originally addressed. And I think that would,
That's a good idea.
that would go a long way towards clearing up the concerns that Tom and Doug have raised, which I share, that something that is written in response to a letter addressed to Tom as a board member will be perceived by the recipient as a response on behalf of the person to whom the letter was originally written. So I think it's just important, if you are going to respond to such a letter, which I'm not disputing that it's appropriate that you do so. I'm just saying, if you're going to, please make it very clear to the person to whom you're writing, who clearly was already confused. Make it clear, this response is not being sent to you on behalf of the Environmental Control Board or any individual member. And I think that would at least alleviate my concern that a response will be perceived in that fashion. I also think that, the timing, I think, is the issue that Tom and Doug are really raising. My personal view is, yes, if you're going to write a letter that's on your behalf and is clearly from Oath and not from the Environmental Control Board or the members of the Environmental Control Board, I actually don't have an issue that we should have to see it in advance, or I don't have an issue with that. But I think it would have been probably better to send Tom the original communication from Avigdor when it was received, so that, you know, if he felt that if he wanted to respond in a more timely fashion, he would have had the opportunity to do so. I mean, maybe this guy is a total wacko, as you describe it. I read the letter, I read the correspondence, and I didn't perceive his complaints to have a great deal of merit, but you know, Tom might have felt differently, or we might receive another communication that in the view of the board or a particular member of the board is more meritorious, and we'd like to respond to it in our capacity, and maybe in a more timely fashion than, I don't know if it was weeks or months later that Tom actually got it. So I would just suggest that if you're going to respond on your behalf, make it clear it's on your behalf, not the board, and provide communications of this nature if they're addressed to an individual board member or to the citizen members of the board. Just give it to us, you know, in a more timely fashion, so that if we feel like we need to address it, we can without a lot of delay. So those are my points.
Thank you. I think that paragraph you quoted made it clear that this was a response from Oath, but I can see that someone who may be otherwise challenged may interpret it differently. Correspondence addressed to board members are sent to board members to do with which whatever they see fit, and it was done, and board members can continue to do with it whatever they see fit to do.
So let me just put forth for the record that my point is not that anything contained within the letter is good, bad, or otherwise. I credit Elizabeth's remarks. They're sensible. They make sense. Mr. Avigdor's, I think, main confusion was who has jurisdiction over the matters that he was trying to bring before a city tribunal. And the notion of his wanting or needing some explanation concerning the workings of city government, I believe that, I don't just believe, it is a fact that we, in our capacity as board members, should be cooperating and communicating, not arguing by disparaging one another or one another's ideas, but by calmly and soberly exchanging our viewpoints so that we can promote governance, not deter it. That's a notion that is unassailable.
It sounds very nice. I don't know what it means.
What it means is that for you to raise your voice or denigrate a citizen with a complaint.
I won't denigrate anybody who deserves to be denigrated, period. I don't care whether he's a citizen or a Martian.
Nevertheless, we as board members have an opportunity.
I take enough nonsense every day from all kinds of
Excuse me.
rubbish coming out that
Please-
I'm not going to
please
sit
allow
there
me-
and enjoy it.
Please allow me to continue without interrupting me. I'm trying to make a point that's an important one. We as a board have an opportunity to improve the manner in which we communicate under the guise of promoting good governance. And we as board members represent ex officio various commissioners of a number of very important city agencies, and by our very composition, we citizen members have been appointed to represent constituencies to protect the interests of the citizens of this city. It's not an obligation I take lightly. The correspondence in question was replied to within 2 or 3 days, well within the 14 days that we have as a principle to respond to these types of inquiries. There was ample opportunity for me or anyone else on the board to see this correspondence. That opportunity seems to have been purposely foregone, and that is a black eye on this board. The removal of this correspondence from the agenda is not in furtherance of good governance, but it is to thwart the notion of governance. That's the point I'm trying to make. And if anyone feels differently, this is a very good opportunity for them to set the record straight with their views.
To set the record straight, I don't have to share with anybody on this board my response to a communication that I receive, whether it's right or wrong or whatever in it. That's number one. Number two, there are a lot of folks who think that they can get from government or from anybody else by whining and putting up false cries of this, that, or the other thing, including outrageous insults to government agencies and government officials. And we, like good, sober public officials, will sit there and grin and take the garbage as it is flung to us. That's a matter of philosophy for one person or another. I'm not inclined to sit here and smile as someone throws insults or lies or falsehoods at me. I respond to them. That's number two. Number three, a piece of correspondence, whether it was addressed to this board, addressed to the governor, the president, or the mayor, that comes to my attention regarding the operation of my agency, I will respond to. The persons or persons to whom that correspondence is first addressed, that is the addressee on the salutation, can do with it whatever he wants or she wants, in whatever fashion he wants. But I am under no compulsion to consult with anybody as to my response in my capacity as the head of that agency. On the other hand, if it is a response for the board, as, for example, the innumerable issues that are brought before the board vote, that's an entirely different matter. Now, you're of the opinion that because that letter involved, in part, the Environmental Control Board, that it has to go to some kind of collaborative board process, which you, I presume, is part of what you characterize as governance. Fine, that's your opinion. In my opinion, if it is something that addresses something that's within my exclusive scope of responsibility, I will respond to it. And I will not, at my discretion, consult with anybody else, or will consult with anybody else. As far as this particular letter, the only difference between this letter and the zillions of 311 messages we get, and they're all over the campus, is that it was addressed to a specific member of the board, of this board. And that's basically it. And your view as to governance, and I'm not exactly sure what governance you're talking about, are fine. That's your view, and it is what it is. You have the correspondence there. If you wish to consult with other board members, if you wish to consult with anybody else that you want, you can consult with them. You can respond to the person if you wish to respond to that person directly or not. That is your business. If you wish the board as a body to respond to them, you can then bring that to the board for a board response. Why was it removed from the agenda? Because it did not belong on the agenda. The person in question asked that it be distributed to all members of the board. And for economy's sake, rather than mail it out to everybody separately, we sent it out together with the board materials. But there's nothing to discuss about it. Therefore, it's not on the agenda. There's nothing to discuss there. There's nothing in that letter that was open for discussion that I'm aware of. If somebody felt that it was open for discussion, then they would simply bring it up for discussion, as any board member can bring up anything for discussion during a meeting.
So.
As you
again,
did, by the way.
And I did, but I think I've said it now 3 or 4 times. There's nothing about the underlying facts that I'm here to discuss. What I'm here to discuss
is that we didn't go and ask you for your input and opinion in Oath's response. That's your problem.
It's not a correct characterization of my problem. My problem is that the reply was made without anybody knowing about it. The letter is written as though I was CC'd on it before it went out, or that it says that I was CC'd. I was CC'd after the fact, after the arguments have been devised, and I am suggesting that that was a missed opportunity for us to communicate as a board. You've mischaracterized my remarks, and I'm going to let the record stand. I assume this is on video. It is what it is. I'm interested in how this will be characterized within the minutes. Nevertheless, my point is simply that correspondence directed to a board member in their capacity as a board member in the interest of effective governance should be shared with that board member before a reply is fashioned, not after. And I would think that anybody here who feels differently, other than our chair, should advance that view now so that we can have that debate.
But if the letter basically is improperly sent to the board, and it should have really been sent to Oath, and it was sent to Oath as well, and the commissioner takes the bull by the horns and just simply deals with it, I really don't
I
see
can
why it
address that
needs to come
easily.
to us.
The point is that I'm not going to the sufficiency of the argument. I'm talking about the very nature of its existence. And you're missing my point, respectfully, Debbie. The point is, whether the gentleman had a good argument or one that was not good has nothing to do with the remarks the notion I'm advancing.
I don't agree with that.
Well, then you can explain why.
Because it should never have been sent to the UCB board.
That's the very problem that we're facing, though, is that there's an attempt afoot to water down the responsibilities of this board that's been afoot for a long time now, and the lack of correspondence, the lack of communication is really at the crux of this. And to not share the correspondence with the person to whom it was addressed is a missed governance opportunity.
No, I think it's an overinflated sense of importance to the board.
Thank you for sharing your views. I don't espouse them.
Madam LaGuardia Sanitation. I've been on this board since 2001. I cannot imagine this is the first time an individual board member has ever received correspondence. I understand your opinions on this. I have never had any correspondence shared with me that came to the board. And because, well, if it was addressed to the board inadvertently, this is how government works. My commissioner does not read every single thing that she gets in the mail. It gets distributed for someone else to answer. She's copied on it so that she has a copy of it. And I think in this instance, you were copied on the response. I understand your points, but you were copied on the response. The Health Tribunal has absolutely nothing to do with this board. The Health Tribunal has always been a separate tribunal and only recently has been merged into the Hearings Division at Oath. So I can't really dispute, I mean, granted, probably the tones being used on both sides probably were not professional and appropriate. But I think the substance, the letter that went out, maybe with Elizabeth's changes in the future that says it's from Oath directly, would be helpful. But I personally, and from an agency standpoint, do not see an issue with the letter that was sent out.
Jorge Martinez, would it be helpful, would it be onerous, I should ask whether it would be too much for, if a letter comes in addressed to any board member, for the board member to just at the same time, it would be transmitted to the board member. I don't know how many of these come through. I haven't me personally, I haven't seen any in the time I've been here. It's been a while. But I mean, no one's asking, or at least I wouldn't demand that we have a say in the response, because as you said, it deals with both issues, not ECP issues. But if it's addressed to a board member, would it be onerous for that missive, this letter, to be sent out to the board member? They can do with it as they wish. They can consult with other board members, they can ask questions.
That's what exactly was done.
No, that's not what was done.
It was not sent to you? You don't have a copy of it in front of your face right
Not
now?
at the
Excuse me.
time it arrived.
I did not get it until the reply had already gone out.
The reply was going to go out whether you got it or not.
And that's not my point.
Then what is your point? That you get it before we send the reply out?
That I have some understanding of what was sent in and what was sent out.
Since it was sent by, I mean, I think I'm just piggybacking on Jorge's point, which I had made earlier, to the extent it was sent by email, it seemed like it would have been a simple matter to flip the email to Tom at the time it was received. That's all. Just send it to him, not have him, not necessarily
Well,
have him involved in the response.
the mistake that was done was to fashion the response and send it together so the recipient was fully informed of the deficiencies in the correspondence as a matter of information.
I don't understand your point. Are you saying the mistake was sharing it with me at all?
I'm saying that the mistake was waiting to and including in the forwarding Oath's response, which was held back together and sent at the same time, so it would be easier for the board members, and that board member in particular, to see the issues that were incorrectly put forward by the correspondent. Fine, in the future, maybe the process should simply be, as was suggested by the health department, forward the correspondence directly to you with no explanation or elucidation, and my response would go out separately without sharing it with anybody. And you can continue to function in a vacuum.
Shimon McGrath, Department of Buildings. First, correspondence gets misrouted within city agencies on a regular basis. But I think what's missing here is when it is misrouted, there is a clear statement in any response that the original correspondence was misrouted and was forwarded to me for reply, or since I was included, I'm replying. So that's the piece, as Elizabeth suggested, that's missing here. On behalf of the Department of Buildings, I just want to make clear that we do not share the sentiments of the chair regarding the people who write us letters and who complain. We do receive thousands of them. You are absolutely correct. Some have merit, some do not. But I want to make clear that every single one of them deserve some type of response.
Absolutely.
And I also want to make clear, which you did, and I'm fine with, I'm not speaking to the merit or the tone of this letter, but I also want to make clear that on behalf of the Department of Buildings, should any correspondence come through to Department of Buildings that is addressed to myself as the representative for the Department of Buildings, then I am expressly requesting that I have a copy of it, even if there's a lot of them. And the other thing that I want to point out, to suggest that we as board members convene amongst each other to decide what we're going to do or how we will approach a situation when someone has reached out to us, I think is improper. I think it's inappropriate. We have these meetings as the forum to do so, so I don't think it's appropriate for any of us to reach out to each other to have separate and apart meetings from the meeting that we already have scheduled. Also, as Tom pointed out, looking at the dates of the correspondence, because of the dates that they were sent out, if Tom or any other board member had saw fit to have it on the agenda, if we had it in a timely fashion, we could have expressly requested that it be added to the agenda, opposed to making a motion to have a discussion on the matter. Some of the things that were said today and the tones used, I agree with Madeline. We should definitely try to be courteous to each other and respect each other's opinions. Everybody has one, and there's nothing wrong with expressing that. I also want to make clear that if our opinions are not respected, when we open our mouths and we make suggestions, and the result is that we're going to be yelled at or belittled or there's a back and forth, this is not about winning an argument. This is about deciding how to handle things going forward so that the outcome is the best that it can be for the public. We're on this board to protect the public and to make sure that the matters that we are able to decide, we do so in the best interest of for me, public safety, of course. And I just want to make sure that we continue to do that, opposed to watering it down with, jurisdictional issues and things of that sort. Just to be clear, absolutely had the jurisdiction to respond to this letter, and that is just not the point. And I don't want us to lose the fact that that's not the point. Any correspondence to the board should go to the board before any response is sent out, if that response does not make clear that it is not on behalf of the board. It's just that simple.
Thank you.
I know it wasn't simple, I'm sorry.
That was pretty straightforward, I think. In English, I think it's clearly understood.
I like plain language. Customers understand plain language for the record.
Sometimes. Is there a motion to adjourn to executive session for judicial review? We're going to executive session.
I think it's unanimous. We are now in public session.
I just want to say from the fire department, Joseph Gregory, that without getting into right or wrong with respect to the issue that we discussed previously, I just think that the exchange that we witnessed and that the public witnessed highlights the importance of board members, all board members, to be civil toward each other and not antagonistic. So once the professionalism goes out the window, the effectiveness of the board is greatly diminished, and that doesn't benefit anybody, whether it's the public, board members, or anyone. I just wanted to say that because I think it's important for us to remain professional. This is a professional environment. We're all professionals in one field or another, and I don't think that there's any excuse for anybody deviating from that profession under any circumstances.
You're here.
Any second? We're good.
Happy holidays, everyone.